Welcome to Sleepy Historian, where history drifts through the quiet of night, stories of the past told softly to calm your mind and guide you to rest. The sea is calm tonight, not because they were certain, but because they were curious. There is a kind of courage in that of the quiet, trembling courage of those who walk into the unknown, not for riches or glory, but because they must know what lies beyond the edge of their maps. As more ships left Europe, the Atlantic became a corridor of hope and loss. Voyages overlapped, trails crossed, and somewhere along that vast highway of water, stories began to weave together. A Spanish galleon caught in a hurricane might vanish near the Azores, only to be spotted months later by a French merchant ship, drifting silently, its sails torn, its deck empty. A Dutch vessel, blown off course, might find a strange island, filled with birds that had never seen humans before. A Portuguese ship might claim to have found paradise, then sink before returning home. Each voyage added a whisper to the ocean, a fragment of truth or imagination that carried across the centuries. Even now, when the waves crash against the eastern coast of America, it is said you can still hear those whispers, stories half forgotten, half true, mingled with the wind. When the first settlers finally began to return to Europe with tales of the New World, they spoke of endless forests and wide rivers, of native peoples who lived close to the earth, of winters so harsh the stars themselves seemed to freeze. The news fascinated and frightened those who heard it. For some, it was proof that God had created another Eden. For others, it was a warning, a reminder that mankind was not meant to roam so far from home, but the tide could not be turned. Voyage after voyage followed, each ship carrying more souls, more dreams, more burdens across the water. And with each crossing, the two worlds grew closer, the old and the new, bound forever by the restless sea. If you stood on the deck of one of those ships near the middle of the Atlantic, you would feel it, that strange sense of being nowhere and everywhere at once. Behind you, the past. Ahead of you, the unknown. Beneath you, eternity. The sea stretches out in every direction, blue and endless. The sun sets slow and deep, turning the waves to molten gold. Seabirds cry overhead, and in that fading light, every sailor feels a quiet shift inside, a moment of surrender. They are no longer who they were when they left home. The voyage has changed them. It has stripped away their old certainties, leaving only the simple rhythm of existence. The sea, the wind, the stars. And perhaps that is what the ocean always intended, to wash away what was small and leave behind only wonder. As night falls again, the wind grows gentle. The ship glides smoothly through the dark. Lanterns swing softly, their light reflecting in the black water like tiny suns. Some men hum softly, keeping time with the waves. Others pray. A few stand silent, gazing toward the horizon, waiting for the first sign of land. The captain, alone at the helm, closes his eyes for a moment. He thinks of home, of a woman's voice, of church bells, of the sound of rain on cobblestones. He knows he may never hear them again. He opens his eyes and looks to the stars. They shine cold and clear, ancient as time. He takes a deep breath, and the ship sails on somewhere far ahead. The coast of America waits, unseen, patient, eternal. The ocean whispers its promise, and the voyage continues. The sea has a memory. It remembers every ship that ever floated, every sailor who ever gazed across its endless blue, every whispered prayer into the wind. Some memories linger quietly. Others drift in the mist, half forgotten. appearing only to those patient enough to notice. It is said that on certain nights, when the fog hangs low and the stars hide their faces, the ocean shows glimpses of what has been lost. Ghost ships glide silently over the waves, their sails torn but their lanterns still lit, as if they were following a course set long ago. No sound comes from them, no creak of timbers, no laughter, no shouting. Only the faint shimmer of light reflecting on the dark water, a calm that feels both welcoming and terrible. These ships are the shadows of voyages that vanished into history, the merchant galleons that never reached their destinations, the explorers who disappeared into storms, the captains who charted unknown rivers and left no trace behind. The sailors of the New World's early years often told stories of such apparitions. They spoke of ships drifting in and out of fog, visible only for a moment, then gone as if swallowed by the night. Some claimed that if you watched too long, the ghostly sailors might wave at you, their faces pale and expressionless. Whether these tales were true, no one could say, but every seafarer who spent long months crossing the Atlantic learned to respect the silence of the sea and the secrets it kept. The ocean was generous to some, cruel to others. It carried treasure, knowledge, new lands, but it also swallowed men and ships without warning, leaving only whispers in the wind and driftwood on distant shores. Hidden harbors were places where hope and fear met, inlets tucked behind jagged rocks, bays shielded by cliffs, coves that no map marked. These were the safe places, the quiet corners where ships might anchor and sailors might rest, even if only for a night. Yet not all hidden harbors were safe. Some were traps, natural or otherwise. Shifting sandbars could crush a ship's hull. Fog could turn a calm bay into a labyrinth. And occasionally pirates or rival explorers lay in wait, watching the water for signs of the weary or the lost. The first explorers of early America learned these lessons quickly. A single mistake could end a voyage. A poorly judged tide could strand men on a narrow spit of land, with no food or water and no way back to their ship. And yet, for all the danger, the harbors offered refuge, soft and mysterious, half hidden from the world. Imagine standing at the edge of one such bay, just as the sun slips below the horizon. The sky is a gradient of deep violet and gold, reflecting off the water's gentle waves. A small ship rocks lightly in the quiet cove, its sails still, its crew tending to the last chores of the day. In the distance, shadows of trees line the shore. The wind carries the scent of pine and salt. The air is cool, soft against the skin, as if the world itself is exhaling. You can almost hear it. The creak of an oar, the soft slap of water against a hull, the hushed murmurs of men who have traveled far and are grateful for a place to rest. And somewhere beyond the mist, a larger ship drifts silently, unseen at first, then slowly revealing its presence. Its sails are tattered, its flag hangs limply, its lanterns sway in the breeze, casting pale reflections across the water. No one on the small ship speaks, no one moves. All know, without knowing why, that this is a ghost ship, a vessel from another time, another voyage, another story. The legends of such ships were passed down quietly. One tale spoke of a merchant ship from Lisbon that vanished into a hurricane and was never heard from again. Months later, it appeared off the coast of Virginia, drifting in silence. The crew was gone. Only the captain's journal remained, open on the deck, its pages soaked and illegible. Another story tells of a French ship blown off course, reaching a hidden bay in the Carolinas. There the sailors found an abandoned settlement, the fire still smoldering but no one alive. Birds nested in the chimneys, and the ocean had carried the people away, leaving only whispers behind. These stories were told not to frighten, but to remind sailors of the sea's power, its patience, its memory, its quiet insistence that it was larger than any man or ship. And yet, the hidden harbors and ghost ships were also places of wonder. Some explorers wrote of entering a secluded cove at dawn, mist curling around the hull like smoke from a fire. They would step ashore and find plants and trees unknown in Europe, the soft hum of insects filling the quiet air. The water glimmered with fish, the sands shone pale in the morning light. For a moment they forgot the fear, the hunger, the storms. They forgot the months of endless waves. In that quiet corner of the world, time seemed to pause. Some even believed that the ghost ships themselves were guides, spirits of sailors who had perished, helping the living find shelter or safe passage. Whether true or imagined, the feeling of calm and awe lingered long after the ships disappeared behind the fog. Early America's coasts were full of such hidden treasures, not just gold or silver, but quiet places of rest, forgotten bays and silent forests. Explorers charted them carefully, sometimes marking them in journals, sometimes leaving them unnamed for future travelers to discover. It was in these places that the first seeds of settlement were planted. Simple shelters made of wood and reeds, small gardens with unfamiliar plants, fires that burned gently against the chill of night. These were the beginnings of life in the New World, tentative, careful and full of wonder, and yet as the settlers grew bolder, the ocean never forgot. It would remind them of its presence, sometimes with storms that ripped through their fragile homes, sometimes with whispers of the ships that had vanished before them. Every wave carried a story, every breeze seemed to murmur a name, and the sailors, settlers and wanderers learned to listen, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Some nights, the ocean would be impossibly still. No wind, no sound, only the gentle lapping of water against the shore. The sky reflected perfectly in the waves, a mirror of stars and dark clouds. In that stillness, one could almost see the ghost ships drift past, sails faintly glowing, lanterns swaying. It was not frightening, only surreal, as if time itself had paused to acknowledge the lives that had been lost, the voyages that had never ended, the explorers who had vanished into history's shadow. The settlers would light small fires on the beaches, smoke curling toward the heavens, a signal both to the living and the dead. And somewhere out at sea, the ghostly ships would pass by, their crews perhaps watching silently, remembering the living who had dared to follow their path. The hidden harbors and ghost ships are not just tales, they are reminders, soft, quiet and eternal, that the world is vast, and that not all journeys are meant to be known, even today. If you close your eyes and drift across the Atlantic in imagination, you can sense them, the forgotten galleons, the lost merchants, the explorers who vanished beneath waves that stretch farther than memory. They linger in the mists, in the tides, in the whispers of the wind, and the land of early America waits patiently for those who come ashore. A world of quiet forests, wide rivers, hidden bays, and untold wonders. The ships continue their slow dance. Some disappear into the fog, some rest in calm waters, waiting, and the ocean remembers always quietly, endlessly. Morning comes quietly to the new land. The fog that veiled the coast all night begins to thin, drifting upward like pale smoke until the first shafts of sunlight touch the trees. The forest glows gold and green, heavy with dew. Every branch seems to shimmer. The sea, once restless, lies calm again, breathing softly against the sand as though it too has grown tired. The sailors rise slowly from their tents. They move with care, unsure if the world around them is real or still part of a dream. The air smells of pine and damp earth. Somewhere close by, a river murmurs through the undergrowth, its song gentle and steady. It is the first true morning of the new world. They walk inland a short distance, their boots sinking into moss. Birds call above them, strange voices, unfamiliar rhythms. Every sound feels new, the crack of a twig, the hiss of wind through tall grass, the low hum of insects waking to the sun. For a long time, no one speaks. Even the most talkative among them understands instinctively that this is sacred ground. They have crossed a border, not marked on any map, a border between the world they knew and the one that waits before them. A young sailor kneels and runs his fingers through the soil. It is dark and rich. He closes his eyes for a moment and imagines wheat fields, orchards, homes. He doesn't know that those dreams will take generations to grow. But in that quiet second, he feels the pulse of possibility. The captain orders a small group to scout. Along the coast, they follow a narrow trail that winds through cedar and oak until they reach a small bluff overlooking the bay. From there, the sea stretches wide and gleaming. Their ship lies at anchor, tiny against the horizon. Behind them, the land rolls inward, hills, rivers, forests without end. The air feels endless, unclaimed. They decide to name the place Haven Bay, for it has given them safety after months of storm and hunger. On their maps, still damp from sea air, they draw a rough line to mark it. Later, future captains will see that name and smile, never knowing who first wrote it there. In the days that follow, they begin to build. Nothing grand, only small shelters of timber and bark, simple fires, a rough dock where boats can rest. Each evening, as the sun sets, they gather around the flames. The heat warms their hands. The smoke drifts upward and stories begin to flow. One man speaks of his home in Devon, another of a lost love in Seville. They talk softly, as though afraid to disturb the stillness of the land. Sometimes the native people watch from a distance, quiet figures at the tree line, half hidden by the shadows. No words are exchanged yet, only cautious glances, the beginnings of understanding. Both groups know that this meeting will change everything, but for now, it is enough simply to share the same wind. The nights are long and clear. When the fires fade, the stars appear in numbers beyond counting. They hang low over the water, reflected in the calm bay until the world above and below seem one and the same. A few men whisper prayers. Others lie awake, staring upward, wondering if the same stars shine above their families an ocean away. Somewhere out on the dark water, the faint glow of a lantern moves. The ship at anchor, standing guard, the ocean sighs against the rocks, the forest breathes, and sleep comes gently, like mist settling over the camp. Weeks pass. They learn the rhythm of this new shore, the tides, the weather, the sounds that drift from the woods at night. They plant small gardens near the riverbank. Using seeds brought from home, they fish in the bay, learning which currents are kind and which are cruel. Every day brings a small discovery, a plant that heals, a bird that sings only at dusk, a shell that gleams like pearl. They begin to believe that perhaps the sea has delivered them not to danger, but to peace. But the ocean never releases its travelers so easily. One evening, As the storm gathers far offshore, they stand together on the beach. The wind rises, tugging at their coats. Lightning flickers beyond the horizon, a thin silver thread across the dark sky. They watch in silence, each man lost in thought. The sea they once crossed now feels like an old friend and a distant enemy. It gave them land, yet it still calls to them, whispering in the thunder, reminding them that their journey is not truly over. When rain begins to fall, soft and cold, they retreat to their shelters. The fire crackles. The sound of rain on wood fills the night like a lullaby. They sleep lightly, dreaming of waves. Morning returns bright and clean. The storm has passed, leaving the world washed anew. Mist curls from the trees, and the air smells of salt and soil. The captain walks along the beach, his boots sinking into the wet sand. He pauses at the water's edge and looks east, toward home, toward memory, toward all that has been left behind. Then he turns inland, toward the rising sun. He knows there will be hardship. He knows that not all who came ashore will survive the coming winters. But he also knows that something has begun here. Something quiet, patient and enduring, a world taking its first breath, and somewhere beyond the horizon, other ships are already on their way. More voyages, more dreams, more stories waiting to be written into the great, slow heartbeat of a continent. For now the shore is peaceful. The waves move with the rhythm of sleep, steady and soft. Smoke rises in thin threads from the fires. The voices of the settlers fade into murmurs. The new land listens, and the ocean hums a low, endless song, part farewell, part promise. Winter arrived softly, almost politely at first, a thin chill in the mornings, a pale mist that lingered longer over the trees. Then, one night, a frost came that never truly left again. The settlers woke to find the world silvered, every leaf, every branch coated in delicate crystals that shimmered in the rising sun. It was beautiful, and for a moment they forgot the hunger that had begun to gnaw quietly at their bellies. The beauty of the cold has always carried a quiet deception. They had built their homes from rough timber, the walls chinked with moss and clay. Smoke curled from each roof like a thread of memory, carrying the scent of oak wood and dried herbs. Inside, the air was warm but heavy with worry. Food stores were smaller than they hoped. The grain barrels were already half empty. Salted meat hung from beams above the fire. But even that would not last the season. Still they told themselves, and softly, in the candlelight, that they would endure. They had crossed oceans after all. Surely, they could survive a winter. The days shortened until it felt as if the sun itself had grown weary. Morning light came late and left early, giving the world a kind of eternal twilight. The forest stood silent and white, the rivers slow and glassy beneath the ice. Even the ocean's roar softened, as though muffled by snow. At night, the cold crept through the walls. They huddled close to the fire, wrapped in furs, whispering stories to keep the silence away. A mother told her son of the green hills of Devon, where sheep grazed under summer skies. A sailor spoke of his childhood near Lisbon, where the air was warm even in winter. The boy listened with wide eyes, the flames flickering across his face, and for a moment he could almost see it, that faraway warmth. Sometimes the wind would rise suddenly, carrying with it a strange hollow cry. It swept through the cabins and over the snowfields, echoing across the bay. Some said it was the voice of the sea, calling the sailors back home. Others said it was simply the sound of the land, vast and lonely and new. But when the fire burned low and the darkness thickened, it was hard not to imagine spirits moving in the night. The settlers had brought faith with them across the water, but faith sometimes flickered like a dying flame when the nights grew long. Food ran lower still. They learned to stretch each meal, to grind the last of the corn into coarse flour, to boil roots and herbs into thin broth. The children's laughter faded to quiet hums. Even the strongest among them began to move slower, their steps measured, their words few. Yet amid the hardship, there were moments of calm beauty, snow falling gently over the bay, the flakes swirling like tiny white stars, the sound of a wooden door creaking open at dawn, a faint trail of smoke rising straight into the still sky. These small things became their comfort, proof that life continued, even in silence. One night the captain gathered the settlers in the largest cabin. A single candle lit the room, its flame small but steady. He spoke slowly, his voice soft, almost reverent. "The sea brought us here for a reason," he said. "It tests us now, but it has not abandoned us. When spring returns, we will plant again. We will build again. We will remember this winter, not as a curse, but as a beginning." The words were simple, but they carried warmth. In that dim light, surrounded by faces weary but hopeful, something like faith returned. They sang quietly, an old song from the voyage, the melody gentle, the rhythm slow. Outside, the wind calmed as if it too were listening. Days passed. The snow deepened, then began, almost imperceptibly, to fade. The ice on the river cracked one morning with a sound like distant thunder. Drips of water fell from the eaves. A bird called once, sharp and bright, breaking the silence. Spring was coming. They stepped outside, blinking against the light. The air still held a chill, but beneath it there was something new. A hint of earth, of growth, of green things waiting. They had survived. In time, the winter would become a story told beside future fires, a story of quiet strength, of hunger endured and hope unbroken. And though many names would be forgotten, the memory of their endurance would linger, like footprints in melting snow. The bay would thaw, the ships would creak gently against the docks, and the forest would bloom again. But for a few lingering weeks, winter still held the world in its cold, soft hands, and in that stillness there was peace. The sea was patient. While the settlers built and planted and endured the slow rhythm of the seasons, the ocean waited, quiet, immense, watching from the horizon. When the first spring arrived, the ice broke, and the waters of Haven Bay began to stir again. Waves rolled lazily against the rocks. Gulls returned, their cries sharp and distant, and the sailors, restless after a long winter on land, began to dream once more of the open sea. They repaired the old ships, mending sails that had hung limp through the storms. They scrubbed the decks, tested the ropes, and watched the tides with the same reverence as monks reading scripture. The ocean was their faith, unpredictable, demanding, eternal. The captain, older now, stood at the edge of the dock and looked out across the water. He thought of the voyage that had brought them here, the endless waves, the stars that guided them, the moments when the sea seemed to speak in its own language of wind and foam. He also remembered those who had not arrived, ships that had vanished mid-crossing, their names whispered only in letters and prayers. Sometimes, at night when fog rolled in, he imagined hearing the creak of phantom masts beyond the bay, or the faint sound of a bell carried by the wind. No one ever found those ships, but in the world of the sea, vanishing is never the same as being gone. That spring, They sent 2 smaller vessels eastward, one to trade, one to carry word of their survival. The settlers stood on the beach as the sails filled, and the ships glided out toward the horizon. The wind was kind, and the tide high. They watched until the masts were no more than thin lines against the silver light. Then, slowly, even those lines faded into the sky. Days passed, then weeks, and the sea, faithful as ever, remained silent. No sails returned, no word arrived. By midsummer, whispers began. Perhaps the ships had been caught in a storm. Perhaps they had found a new coast and chosen to stay. Perhaps the ocean, vast and unknowable, had taken them into its quiet keeping, as it had taken so many before. At night, some claimed they saw strange lights far out on the water, small, flickering, like candles floating upon the waves. Others said they heard singing when the wind was right, a low, mournful tune that seemed to drift from nowhere. No one was certain, and no one tried to prove it. The settlers had learned by then that mystery was the sea's natural language. Still, life continued. They planted, harvested, built new homes. Children were born who would never remember the voyage across the Atlantic. Only the whisper of the surf at night, but the sea never stopped watching. Each evening, it sent its tides creeping gently toward the shore, as though to remind them all that begins on land once came from water. And sometimes, when fog wrapped the coast in silence, the old captain would walk to the edge of the bay and stare eastward. He would close his eyes and listen, really listen, to the rhythm of the waves. It was the same rhythm he had known his whole life, the slow inhale and exhale of something greater than time. One night, as autumn returned, a storm rose without warning. The air thickened, the wind screamed through the trees, and the sea roared with an ancient fury. Rain fell like shattered glass, and lightning flashed over the water. The settlers huddled in their cabins, whispering prayers, holding onto the walls as the earth trembled. Out beyond the bay, the captain's ship, the Providence, strained against its anchor, its lantern swinging wildly. He stood on deck, soaked through, shouting orders to men who could barely hear him above the wind. The ocean, once calm, was now alive, no longer the gentle mother of their dreams, but something vast and wild and merciless. Then, in one sudden surge, the storm broke its fury upon the ship, a crack like the sky itself splitting, and the Providence was gone, swallowed by the dark. When dawn came, the storm had passed. The bay was eerily still. The settlers searched the shoreline, their boots sinking into wet sand, but there was no wreckage, only the scattered driftwood of trees and the faint scent of salt. No one spoke of what they feared. But that night, as the sun fell red over the water, they saw something far out at sea, a small glimmer, faint and wavering. It looked like a lantern swinging gently, half lost in the mist. It remained there for a long moment, as though waiting, watching, and then it faded. In time, people would say that the Providence still sailed somewhere beyond the fog, that on clear nights, when the moon hung low and the tide was calm, its light could still be seen drifting along the horizon, a ghostly echo of a voyage unfinished. The children grew up hearing those tales. They would stand by the water, eyes wide, searching the waves for a sign, and sometimes, just before sleep, they swore they heard the soft creak of wood, the flap of a distant sail, and the low hum of voices carried by the wind. The ocean, it seemed, remembered every name. Years would pass, generations would come and go. The colony would grow into a town, then a port, and one day into a city. But still, on quiet nights, the people of that place would hear the waves and think of those who never returned. They would stand by the water's edge, the sound of the tide wrapping around them like a lullaby, and whisper the same words their ancestors once spoke. May the sea keep them, and may it one day bring them home. The horizon glows faintly, the last light fades, the sea breathes, slow, steady, endless, and beneath it all, somewhere deep and dark, the lost voyages drift forever, unseen but not forgotten. Night drifts once more across the coast. It comes not with haste, but with the slow grace of a tide returning home. The last colors of the sunset fade behind the trees. Amber, rose and silver melting into one another until the sky becomes a deep, quiet blue. Along the shoreline, the waves breathe in soft rhythm. They rise, curl, and fall out again and again, whispering the same words they have spoken for centuries. To some it sounds like silence, to others it is the voice of the past. Generations have passed since the first settlers built their cabins here. The forest that once pressed close has thinned, replaced by gentle fields and narrow paths leading down to the bay. Children laugh where sailors once prayed for land. A bell tolls faintly from a wooden church on the hill. Time has changed the world, as it always does, but the sea remains the same. If you stand by the water on a calm evening, you can still feel it, that quiet pulse beneath your feet, the sound of waves folding into themselves, the scent of salt, faint but eternal, the rhythm that outlives every ship, every name, every dream. Some nights, the townsfolk still tell the old stories. They speak of the Providence and the lights that sometimes flicker far beyond the bay. They tell of the ghostly sails that glow under the moon, the soft echoes of voices drifting through the mist. And though no one truly believes, not in daylight, at least everyone listens, because in the heart of every listener there is a part that still belongs to the ocean. It is the same part that once gazed from a ship's deck at the endless horizon and whispered, "There is more." The sea has seen it all, the first daring voyages, the storms that scattered them, the long winters of waiting. It holds within it every laughter, every cry, every heartbeat that ever crossed its surface, but it speaks of none of it. Its memory is deep and wordless. Ships come and go, empires rise and fall, centuries fold into one another, like pages of a forgotten book, and still, the sea hums the same soft lullaby, a song of patience, of distance, of endless return. If you listen closely, truly closely, you might hear it even now. A sound so low it seems to come from the bones of the world itself, the sigh of the tide against the stones, the murmur of history, half asleep. Perhaps it tells the stories that were never written down, of sailors who watched the sunrise over the Atlantic, of settlers who planted hope into the frozen soil, of children who grew up chasing gulls along the sand. Their lives, their fears, their quiet joys, and all carried away, wave by wave, into eternity. And yet nothing is ever truly lost. The ocean keeps its secrets not to hide them, but to protect them. It holds them gently, like treasures too fragile for air. Every ripple, every current, every echo of foam is a memory preserved in motion. When the moonlight touches the water just right, the surface gleams like glass. You can almost see through it, and for a moment, if you stand still enough, the boundary between past and present disappears. You are simply there and part of the same silence, part of the same story. The wind softens, the waves slow their rhythm.